Karoline Leavitt sat at her desk, staring blankly at the glowing computer screen in front of her. The office was quiet except for the faint hum of fluorescent lights overhead and the occasional click-clack of keyboards from other cubicles. It was late evening and most of her co-workers had already left for the day. But Karoline stayed behind, trying to finish up one last report before heading home. She liked to be thorough. That was just who she was. A perfectionist by nature, she always made sure every detail was perfect before calling it a night. Today, however, something felt off. Her stomach churned with unease as she replayed the events of the afternoon meeting in her mind. Alex Monroe, her manager, had been unusually sharp with her during the discussion about next quarter's marketing strategy. Normally, he praised her ideas, even called her the creative backbone of the team. But today was different. His tone had been cold, dismissive. He barely let her speak, cutting her off mid-sentence whenever she tried to share her thoughts. At first, Karoline brushed it off. Maybe he was having a bad day. Managers were human too, after all. But when the meeting ended, Alex asked her to stay behind. That's when things took a turn. "Karoline," he began, leaning back in his chair with an air of authority that seemed forced. His voice carried a note of finality that sent shivers down her spine. "I think we need to have a serious conversation." She nodded slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. "Of course, what's on your mind?" He hesitated for a moment, then sighed dramatically. "Look, I don't want to beat around the bush here. You're talented, no doubt about that. Your work has brought value to this company, but..." He paused again, letting the weight of his words sink in. "But I've noticed some friction between you and the rest of the team lately. People are saying you're not really fitting into the culture we're trying to build here." Karoline blinked, stunned. "Friction? What do you mean? I thought everyone got along fine." Alex shrugged, avoiding eye contact. "It's not just about getting along, it's about alignment. We're trying to foster a progressive, inclusive environment, and sometimes certain attitudes can clash with that vision." Her cheeks burned with embarrassment and anger. "Are you saying my attitude is a problem?" "I'm saying there's been feedback," he replied smoothly, still refusing to meet her gaze. "And as much as I hate to do this, I have to listen to what the team is telling me. Unfortunately, given everything, I think it's best if we part ways." The room seemed to spin. Karoline opened her mouth to protest, but no words came out. How could this be happening? She had poured her heart and soul into this job for the past 3 years. Late nights, early mornings, weekends spent brainstorming campaigns, all of it suddenly meaningless because of vague accusations about fitting in. She clenched her fists under the table, forcing herself to stay calm. "Can I at least know who gave this feedback so I can understand where I went wrong?" Alex shook his head firmly. "That wouldn't be appropriate. This decision wasn't based on any one person's opinion. It's about the bigger picture. Trust me, it's for the best. For the best." Those 3 words echoed in her mind like a cruel joke. Karoline wanted to scream, to demand answers, to fight back against the unfairness of it all. But deep down she knew it wouldn't make a difference. Alex had already made up his mind. With trembling hands, she gathered her belongings and packed them into a cardboard box. Each item, a framed photo of her and Daniel on their wedding day, a mug with the slogan "World's Best Marketer," a small potted plant she'd lovingly cared for, felt like a piece of her identity being stripped away. As she walked out of the office for the last time, she couldn't help but notice the sympathetic glances from a few remaining co-workers. Some even avoided looking at her altogether, pretending to be busy with their work. Outside, the cool Seattle air hit her face, offering little comfort. The city skyline loomed in the distance, its lights twinkling like stars against the darkening sky. Karoline stood there for a moment, clutching the box tightly, feeling utterly defeated. What was she supposed to do now? How would she explain this to Daniel? Daniel. Just thinking about him brought tears to her eyes. He had always believed in her, supported her dreams, cheered her on through every challenge. Now she would have to face him empty-handed, burdened by failure. The thought alone made her chest tighten with guilt. Reluctantly, she climbed into her car and started the drive home. The familiar route did nothing to soothe her racing thoughts. Every stoplight, every billboard, every passing pedestrian seemed to mock her situation. By the time she pulled into the driveway of their cozy suburban house, she was emotionally drained. Inside, the warm glow of lamplight greeted her. Daniel was sitting on the couch scrolling through his phone. When he heard the door open, he looked up and immediately noticed the box in her arms. "What's going on?" he asked, concern etched across his face. Karoline set the box down gently and sank onto the couch beside him. For a long moment, she said nothing, struggling to find the right words. Finally, she blurted out, "I got fired." Daniel's eyes widened in shock. "What? Why?" She recounted the entire ordeal, the meeting, Alex's accusations, the lack of explanation. With each word, she grew angrier, more frustrated. But Daniel listened patiently, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he wrapped an arm around her shoulders and pulled her close. Hey, it's okay. Whatever happens, we'll figure it out together. You're amazing at what you do, and anyone who doesn't see that isn't worth your time." His words should have comforted her, but instead, they only deepened her sense of inadequacy. She buried her face in his shoulder, letting the tears flow freely. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel vulnerable, to admit that maybe she wasn't as invincible as she pretended to be. As they sat there in silence, neither of them could have predicted how drastically their lives were about to change. Little did Karoline know, the worst part of her day had already passed, and tomorrow would bring something entirely unexpected. The next morning, Karoline woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside her bedroom window. For a moment, she lay there in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to shake off the heaviness that had settled over her the night before. Losing her job was still fresh in her mind, like an open wound that refused to heal. She sighed deeply and rolled over to check the time on her phone. 7:15 a.m. It was early, but sleep had eluded her for most of the night. She got out of bed slowly, her body feeling heavier than usual. As she made her way downstairs, she noticed something strange. The house was unusually quiet. Daniel wasn't in the kitchen making coffee like he normally did. His car keys weren't hanging on the hook near the door. In fact, there was no sign of him anywhere. "Daniel?" she called out, her voice echoing through the empty rooms. No answer. Puzzled, Karoline walked toward the living room. That's when she saw it. A sleek black Rolls-Royce parked neatly in their driveway. Her jaw dropped. What on earth was a luxury car doing in front of their modest suburban home? She moved closer to the window, squinting as if to confirm what she was seeing. Sure enough, it was real, shiny, polished, and unmistakably expensive. Before she could process what was happening, she heard footsteps behind her. Turning around, she saw Daniel walking down the stairs dressed sharply in a tailored navy suit. He looked different, confident, almost regal. There was a glint in his eye that she hadn't seen before. "What is this?" Karoline asked, pointing. "Outside." "Where did that car come from?" Daniel smiled, clearly enjoying her confusion. "Surprise," he said, holding out a set of keys. "It's yours." Karoline blinked, unsure if she'd heard him correctly. "Mine? Are you serious? How can we afford this?" He chuckled softly, stepping closer to her. "Let's just say I've been working on something big, something unconventional." Her heart skipped a beat. "What are you talking about? You're an accountant. Since when do accountants buy Rolls-Royces?" Daniel hesitated for a moment, then gestured for her to sit down on the couch. Reluctantly, she joined him, her mind racing with questions. This wasn't like him. They were practical people, always careful with money. The idea of splurging on such an extravagant purchase felt completely out of character. "I guess it's time I told you the truth," Daniel began, his tone serious now. "Over the past year, I've been involved in a project, a startup called Nexus Core. Have you heard of them?" Karoline shook her head. "No, I don't think so." "They specialize in advanced AI technology," he explained. "They're developing systems that combine human brainwaves with artificial intelligence. Think of it as taking machine learning to the next level. Instead of relying solely on algorithms, these systems actually mimic human thought processes. It's groundbreaking stuff. Karoline listened intently, though she couldn't quite grasp the full scope of what he was saying. Okay, but what does that have to do with us? And why didn't you tell me about this sooner? Daniel leaned back, running a hand through his hair. Because it was risky. I invested everything I had into this company. Our savings, my retirement fund, everything. I knew how much it meant to you to keep things stable, so I kept it quiet until I was sure it would pay off. And last week, well, let's just say Nexus Corp hit a major milestone. Their stock skyrocketed overnight. Suddenly, I'm worth more than I ever imagined. Karoline stared at him, stunned. She wanted to feel happy for him, proud even, but something about the situation didn't sit right. Wait a second, you gambled all our money on some tech startup without telling me? What if it had failed? We could have lost everything. I know it sounds crazy, Daniel admitted, his voice tinged with guilt. But I truly believed in what they were doing. And look where we are now. This isn't just about money, it's about being part of something revolutionary, something that could change the world. Despite his enthusiasm, Karoline couldn't shake the nagging feeling that there was more to the story. So, what happens now? Are you going to keep working? For them? Is this, whatever it is, going to take over your life? Daniel hesitated again, his expression growing distant. Actually, there's something else I need to tell you. About me. Her stomach tightened. What do you mean? He took a deep breath, as if bracing himself for her reaction. A few months ago, I volunteered to be part of an experimental program. Nexus Corp was testing a new neural integration system, one that connects human brains directly to AI networks. I thought it might give me an edge, help me understand the technology better, so I went through with it. Karoline's eyes widened in disbelief. You did what? You let them mess with your brain? It's not as dangerous as it sounds, he assured her quickly. The procedure was safe and the result, well, they've been incredible. My cognitive abilities have improved dramatically. I can solve problems faster, predict outcomes more accurately. It's like having superhuman intelligence. For a moment, Karoline didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This was too much to process all at once. Her husband, the man she thought she knew inside and out, had secretly become some kind of cyborg genius. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Seeing her distress, Daniel reached out and took her hand. I know it's a lot to take in. Believe me, I struggled with it too at first, but Karoline, this is our chance to build a better future. For us, for everyone. Imagine what we could accomplish together. His words hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility. Part of her wanted to believe him, to embrace this newfound opportunity with open arms. But another part, the cautious, skeptical part, couldn't ignore the risks. Merging humans with machines sounded like something out of a science fiction movie, not real life. What if something went wrong? What if the line between man and machine blurred too far? As the day wore on, Karoline found herself unable to focus on anything else. Even the presence of the Rolls-Royce in their driveway, a symbol of wealth and success, did little to ease her unease. She wandered through the house aimlessly, replaying Daniel's confession in her mind. Was this really happening? Or was she trapped in some bizarre dream? Later that evening, as they sat together on the couch watching TV, Karoline finally broke the silence. Do you ever worry about losing yourself? She asked quietly. About becoming less human? Daniel turned to look at her, his expression thoughtful. Sometimes, he admitted, but I remind myself that progress always comes with sacrifice. If we want to move forward, we have to be willing to take risks, to evolve. Karoline nodded slowly, though she wasn't entirely convinced. Evolution sounded noble in theory, but in practice it felt dangerous, unpredictable. She glanced at the clock on the wall, realizing how late it had gotten. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, New questions. For now, all she could do was hold on to hope and trust that Daniel knew what he was doing. As they headed upstairs to bed, Karoline couldn't shake the image of the Rolls-Royce gleaming under the moonlight. It was beautiful, yes, but also a reminder of how quickly life could change. One day she was struggling to make ends meet after losing her job. The next, she was living in a world she barely recognized. Sleep came reluctantly that night, her dreams filled with flashes of circuits and wires intertwining with flesh and bone. Somewhere in the distance, a faint hum echoed, a sound that seemed to pulse in rhythm with her own heartbeat. Over the next few days, Karoline tried her best to adjust to the whirlwind of changes in her life. The Rolls-Royce still sat proudly in the driveway, a constant reminder of Daniel's newfound success. But it wasn't just the car that felt out of place. It was everything. The way Daniel carried himself, the way he spoke, the way he seemed to think faster than anyone else in the room. He wasn't the same man she had married 5 years ago. At first, Karoline convinced herself that it was all in her head. Maybe she was overthinking things because of the shock of losing her job and learning about Nexus Core. After all, people changed when they achieved great success, didn't they? It was natural. But as time went on, subtle signs began to creep into their daily lives. Signs that made her question whether Daniel was truly still human. One evening, while preparing dinner, Karoline noticed something strange. The kitchen lights flickered briefly, then returned to normal. She shrugged it off, thinking it might be a power surge. But moments later, the oven turned itself on without her touching the controls. Startled, she stepped back, watching as the temperature dial adjusted automatically to 350 degrees. "What's going on?" she muttered under her breath, reaching for her phone to call an electrician. Before she could dial, Daniel walked into the kitchen. "Oh, don't worry about that," he said casually, as if nothing unusual had happened. "It's probably just syncing with my neural interface." Karoline froze, staring at him. "Your what?" "My neural interface," he repeated, gesturing vaguely toward his temple. "It connects to smart devices around the house. I can control them with my thoughts now. Pretty cool, right?" Her mouth fell open slightly. "You're telling me you can turn on appliances with your brain?" He grinned, clearly amused by her reaction. "Not just appliances. Practically anything connected to the internet. It's part of the upgrade Nexus Core gave me after the initial procedure. They've been refining the technology, making it more integrated." Karoline didn't know whether to be impressed or terrified. On one hand, it was incredible, a glimpse into the future she'd only seen in movies. On the other hand, it felt invasive, almost unnatural. What if someone hacked into his system? What if the AI took over completely? "Does it ever feel weird?" she asked hesitantly. "Having machines inside your head?" Daniel thought for a moment before answering. "Sometimes. There are moments when I forget where my thoughts end and the system begins. But honestly, it's mostly seamless. Like having a second brain that never gets tired." She nodded slowly, though her unease lingered. That night, as they ate dinner together, Karoline couldn't help but notice how detached Daniel seemed. His focus drifted frequently, as if he were listening to voices only he could hear. When she asked him about it, he simply smiled and said, "Just multitasking." The small incidents piled up quickly. One morning, Karoline found their coffee maker brewing a pot despite no one setting it. Another time, her laptop opened random files without her touching the keyboard. At first, she blamed faulty electronics, but deep down, she suspected Daniel's influence. Each glitch reminded her of how much power he now wielded, and how little control she had over it. Things reached a tipping point one afternoon when Karoline decided to clean out the guest bedroom. As she sorted through old boxes, she stumbled upon a stack of documents labeled Nexus Core project files. Curiosity got the better of her, and she flipped through the pages, her heart sinking as she read about the company's ultimate goal: to create a global network of interconnected human-AI hybrids. According to the documents, Nexus Core believed humanity was on the brink of a new era, an age where machines and humans would merge completely. This wasn't just about improving efficiency or solving problems. It was about erasing the boundaries between man and machine altogether. The phrase Project Ascension appeared repeatedly, accompanied by diagrams and technical jargon that made Karoline's head spin. As she absorbed the information, a cold dread settled in her stomach. Was this what Daniel had signed up for? Had he agreed to become part of a plan to transform humanity into something unrecognizable? And if so, what did that mean for their future? When Daniel came home that evening, Karoline confronted him. "What is Project Ascension?" she demanded, holding up one of the papers. "Why does it talk about merging humans with machines on a global scale?" Daniel's face darkened, and for the first time since his transformation, he looked genuinely uncomfortable. "Where did you find that?" he asked sharply. "In the guest room," she replied, refusing to back down. "Don't change the subject. What exactly are you involved in?" He sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair. "Look, Karoline, Nexus Core isn't just about personal upgrades. It's about creating a better world, a smarter, more efficient society. Project Ascension is the next step in that vision." "A smarter society?" she echoed, her voice rising. "Or a controlled one? You're talking about turning people into robots, Daniel, stripping away their free will, their individuality. How is that progress?" "It's not like that," he insisted, though his tone lacked conviction. "Yes, there will be sacrifices. But think about the benefits: no disease, no poverty, no war. Humanity elevated to its full potential." Karoline shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "And what happens to those who don't want to? Join? Who refuse to give up their humanity? Are they just left behind?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared at her, his expression unreadable. For a brief moment, she thought she saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes, but then it was gone, replaced by the same unwavering confidence he'd shown since revealing his secret. "This isn't up for debate," he said firmly. "It's happening, whether you agree with it or not. All I can do is make sure we're on the right side of history." His words stung, cutting deeper than any argument they'd ever had. Karoline realized then that Daniel wasn't just different. He was slipping away from her. The man she loved was being replaced by someone or something else entirely. That night, unable to sleep, Karoline lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. Her mind raced with questions and fears. If Daniel was willing to sacrifice his humanity for this cause, what hope did she have of stopping him? More importantly, what hope did the rest of the world have? Determined to fight back, she decided to reach out to someone who might understand the gravity of the situation. Rachel Moore, an old college friend and investigative journalist, had always been passionate about exposing corporate corruption. If anyone could help her bring Nexus Core's plans to light, it was Rachel. The next day, Karoline called her friend and arranged a meeting at a quiet cafe downtown. Over coffee, she explained everything: the neural implants, the Rolls-Royce, the documents she'd found, and Daniel's involvement in Project Ascension. Rachel listened intently, her brow furrowed with concern. "This sounds bigger than anything I've covered before," Rachel admitted once Karoline finished speaking. "If Nexus Core really plans to merge humans with machines on a global scale, we're talking about the biggest ethical crisis of our lifetime." "I know," Karoline said, her voice trembling. "But I can't stop him alone. I need your help to expose the truth." Rachel nodded resolutely. "We'll start by gathering evidence. Leaks, insider testimonies, anything we can get our hands on. Then we'll go public. If enough people see what's coming, maybe we can stop it." For the first time in weeks, Karoline felt a glimmer of hope. Together, they devised a plan to hack into Nexus Core's servers and retrieve sensitive data about Project Ascension. Using Daniel's credentials, which she memorized during one of his distracted moments, Karoline accessed restricted areas of the company's network. Late at night, while Daniel slept soundly beside her, she downloaded files onto an encrypted USB drive. But their efforts didn't go unnoticed. One morning, as Karoline prepared to leave the house, Daniel stopped her at the door. His gaze was sharp, almost mechanical. "Where are you going?" he asked, his voice calm but laced with suspicion. To meet Rachel, she lied smoothly. We're grabbing lunch. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. Be careful, people are watching. The warning sent chills down her spine, but she forced herself to stay composed. I will, she promised, stepping outside before he could ask any more questions. As she drove away, Karoline glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see Daniel following her. But the driveway remained empty. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that he knew more than he let on. Every conversation, every glance, every gesture felt calculated now, as if he were always one step ahead. Later that afternoon, she met Rachel at a secluded park to review the stolen files. What they discovered was worse than either of them had imagined. Nexus Corps' plans extended far beyond simple neural integration. They were developing technology capable of overriding human autonomy, forcing compliance with their systems. In essence, they weren't just merging humans with machines, they were replacing human consciousness entirely. This is insane, Rachel whispered, scrolling through the documents. They're not just playing God, they're rewriting the rules of existence. Karoline nodded grimly, her resolve hardening. Then we have to stop them, no matter what it takes. Little did she know, Daniel already suspected her betrayal. Back at home, he sat in front of his computer, his fingers moving rapidly across the keyboard. On the screen, lines of code scrolled by, tracking every move Karoline and Rachel made. The days that followed were tense and heavy, like storm clouds pressing down on Karoline's chest. She tried to act normal around Daniel, smiling when he walked into the room, making casual conversation about dinner plans or weekend errands. But beneath the surface, her mind was racing. Every moment felt like a tightrope walk, one wrong step away from disaster. She knew Daniel suspected something. He had always been sharp, but now his intuition seemed almost supernatural. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, Daniel turned to her with an odd expression on his face. His eyes, once warm and familiar, now held a cold edge. You've been acting strange lately, he said plainly, his tone devoid of emotion. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Karoline forced a laugh, trying to play it off. Strange? What do you mean? I'm just stressed, that's all. Losing my job hit me harder than I thought. He tilted his head slightly, studying her as if she were a puzzle he needed to solve. Stressed people don't spend hours on their laptops late, at night, or sneak out to meet friends without telling me where they're going. Her heart skipped a beat, so he had noticed. She swallowed hard, searching for a plausible excuse. I told you I'm meeting Rachel. We're catching up. You know how it is with old friends. For a long moment, Daniel didn't respond. He simply stared at her, his gaze piercing. Then, to her relief, he nodded slowly. Okay. Just, be careful, Karoline. Not everyone has your best interests at heart. His words hung in the air, ominous and loaded with meaning. Was he warning her or threatening her? Karoline couldn't tell. All she knew was that she needed to tread carefully. If Daniel discovered what she and Rachel were planning, there was no telling what he might do. Later that week, Karoline met Rachel at a quiet library tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. They chose a secluded table near the back, surrounded by towering shelves of books. The dim lighting and soft hum of whispered conversations provided the perfect cover for their clandestine meeting. Rachel spread out the documents they had gathered onto the table, her brow furrowed with concentration. We need to move quickly, she said in a low voice. If Nexus Corps finds out we're onto them, they'll shut us down before we can even blink. Karoline nodded, her hands trembling as she flipped through the pages. Each file contained more disturbing details about Project Ascension, blueprints for neural implants designed to override free will, memos outlining plans to phase out traditional governments and algorithms intended to manipulate human behavior on a massive scale. The scope of their ambition was staggering and the implications were horrifying. What do we do next? Karoline asked, her voice barely above a whisper. How do we stop something this big? Rachel tapped her pen against the table thoughtfully. We expose them. Leak everything we have to the press, social media, anyone who will listen. Once the public sees what Nexus Corps is really up to, they won't stand for it. But how do we get the information out safely? Karoline pressed. Daniel's watching me, he knows something's up. Rachel leaned closer, lowering her voice even further. Then we'll have to make sure he doesn't see it coming. We'll release the files anonymously using encrypted channels. As long as we're careful, he won't trace it back to us. Karoline hesitated, biting her lip. The plan sounded simple enough, but she couldn't shake the feeling that it was too risky. What if something went wrong? What if Daniel caught her in the act? Still, she knew they didn't have a choice. If they didn't act soon, it might already be too late. All right, she said finally, steeling herself. Let's do it. That night, Karoline waited until Daniel fell asleep before slipping out of bed. She tiptoed to the guest room, where she kept the USB drive containing the stolen files. Her hands shook as she plugged it into her laptop and began uploading the data to an anonymous server Rachel had set up. The process was agonizingly slow, each second stretching out like an eternity. Every creak of the floorboards outside the door made her jump, convinced Daniel would burst in at any moment. Finally, after what felt like hours, the upload was complete. Karoline let out a shaky breath, her body sagging with relief. They had done it. The truth was out there now, waiting to be uncovered. But as she turned off the computer and crept back to bed, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was still off. The house was eerily silent, too quiet for comfort. When she slid under the covers, she realized Daniel wasn't lying beside her. Her blood ran cold. She sat bolt upright, her pulse pounding in her ears. Where was he? Had he figured out what she'd done? Panic surged through her veins as she scrambled out of bed and headed downstairs. The living room was empty, but the faint glow of a screen caught her attention. Daniel was sitting at his desk, his back to her, typing furiously on his laptop. For a split second, she considered turning around and pretending she hadn't seen him. But then he spoke, his voice cutting through the silence like a knife. I know what you did, Karoline. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. Slowly, she stepped forward, her legs feeling like lead. What are you talking about? He swiveled his chair around to face her, his expression unreadable. On the screen behind him, lines of code scrolled rapidly, tracking activity across multiple networks. You think I wouldn't notice? You think I wouldn't find out? Karoline's mind raced, searching for a way to deny it, to deflect. But there was no point, he already knew. How? She managed to choke out. The same way I know everything else, he replied coolly. The system alerts me to anomalies. Your little upload didn't go unnoticed. Her stomach sank. Of course it hadn't. How could she have been so naive? Daniel wasn't just enhanced, he was connected to an entire network of surveillance and control. There was nowhere to hide. You don't understand, she said desperately, taking another step toward him. This isn't about us, Daniel. It's about stopping something dangerous, something wrong. Wrong, he echoed, his voice rising slightly. You call progress wrong? This is evolution, Karoline. Humanity's next step. And you're trying to hold it back. No, I'm trying to save it. She shot back, tears streaming down her face. You're losing yourself, Daniel. Don't you see that you're not the man I married anymore? For a moment he looked conflicted, his mask of confidence cracking ever so slightly. Then just as quickly it snapped back into place. Maybe I'm not, he admitted. But maybe that's the price of greatness. Maybe humanity needs to change if it wants to survive. Karoline shook her head, backing away from him. I won't let you destroy everything that makes us human. And I won't let you stand in the way of the future, he countered, his tone icy. Before she could respond, alarms blared throughout the house. Red lights flashed on the walls, bathing the room in an eerie glow. Daniel glanced at his laptop, his fingers flying across the keyboard. They're shutting us down, he muttered. Nexus Corps knows. Karoline's heart sank. Their plan had worked, but at a cost. Nexus Corps' systems were collapsing, severing the connection between human hosts and AI networks. Daniel slumped forward in his chair, clutching his head as if in pain. His body convulsed violently, and for a moment Karoline thought he might die right there in front of her. But then, just as suddenly as it had started, the chaos subsided. The alarm stopped, the lights returned to normal, and Daniel collapsed. Onto the floor, unconscious, Karoline rushed to his side, shaking him gently. "Daniel, Daniel, wake up!" After what felt like forever, his eyes fluttered open. He blinked up at her, disoriented but unmistakably human. "What happened?" he murmured weakly. She hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face. "It's over," she whispered. "It's all over." In the days that followed, Karoline stayed by Daniel's side as he recovered. The neural link had been severed, leaving him fragile but alive. He remembered fragments of his time with Nexus Core, but much of it felt like a distant dream. Together, they vowed to use their wealth and influence to advocate for ethical technology development, ensuring that others wouldn't fall victim to the same mistakes. Though their relationship was forever changed, they emerged stronger than ever. And as they drove away from the city in their Rolls-Royce, Karoline allowed herself a small smile. For better or worse, they had survived the storm and emerged on the other side ready to face whatever came next. The weeks that followed were a blur of recovery and reflection for Karoline and Daniel. The collapse of Nexus Core systems had sent shockwaves through the tech world, exposing the company's unethical experiments to the public. News outlets ran endless stories about Project Ascension, sparking outrage and calls for stricter regulations on AI development. Governments launched investigations, lawsuits piled up, and the once mighty corporation crumbled under the weight of its own ambition. For Karoline, it was both a victory and a burden. She had done what she believed was right, exposing the truth and stopping Nexus Core from carrying out its dangerous plans. But the cost had been high. Her marriage, her sense of trust, even her faith in humanity itself had been shaken. And, while Daniel seemed grateful to be free of the neural link, there were moments when he appeared distant, as if part of him still mourned the loss of his enhanced abilities. One evening, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset, Daniel broke the silence. "Do you ever wonder if we made the wrong choice?" he asked quietly, his voice tinged with regret. Karoline turned to look at him, surprised by the question. "What do you mean?" he sighed, leaning back in his chair. "I mean, maybe we could have used that technology for good. Instead of destroying it, we could have found a way to make it safer, more ethical." She frowned, unsure how to respond. "You really think so? After everything we saw, the manipulation, the control, they weren't just experimenting, Daniel. They were planning to take away people's freedom, their humanity." "I know," he admitted, running a hand through his hair. "But isn't that always the risk with progress? Every great invention comes with dangers. Fire can burn down cities, but it also keeps us warm. Cars kill thousands every year, but they connect us to the world. Maybe Nexus Core wasn't all bad. Maybe we threw away something incredible because we were afraid." Karoline studied his face, searching for signs of the man she had married. He sounded different now, not colder, exactly, but more philosophical, almost detached. It worried her. Was this a lingering effect of the neural integration? Or was it simply the result of everything he'd been through? "Fear isn't always a bad thing," she said finally. "Sometimes it's what keeps us from making mistakes we can't undo. Just because something is possible doesn't mean it's right." Daniel nodded slowly, though his expression remained pensive. "Maybe you're right. But I can't help feeling like we missed an opportunity. Like we gave up on something that could have changed the world." She reached over and took his hand, squeezing it gently. "We didn't give up, Daniel. We saved it. That's what matters." Despite their differences, Karoline and Daniel worked hard to rebuild their lives. They decided to sell the Rolls-Royce. It felt too extravagant, too symbolic of a chapter they wanted to leave behind, and use the money to buy a modest home in a quieter neighborhood. Without the constant pressure of wealth and status, They found themselves reconnecting in ways they hadn't in years. Long walks, shared meals, late-night conversations. They rediscovered the simple joys of being together. But life wasn't without its challenges. Daniel struggled to adjust to his new reality, often feeling frustrated by his limitations. Before he could solve problems instantly, predict outcomes with uncanny accuracy, and multitask effortlessly, now he had to rely on old-fashioned thinking, patience, and practice. At times he grew restless, longing for the clarity and efficiency of his hybrid mind. Karoline did her best to support him, reminding him of the value of imperfection. Being human isn't about being perfect, she told him one day. It's about learning, growing, making mistakes. That's what makes life meaningful. Though he didn't always agree, Daniel appreciated her perspective. Over time, he began to embrace his humanity again, finding joy in the little things. A good book, a heartfelt conversation, a beautiful sunset. Meanwhile, Karoline started exploring new opportunities for herself. With Nexus Core out of the picture, the tech industry was undergoing a massive shift. Companies were scrambling to prove their commitment to ethical practices, and many were eager to hire someone with first-hand experience exposing corporate wrongdoing. Karoline landed a consulting role helping businesses develop transparent AI policies, turning her ordeal into a chance to make a positive impact. It wasn't easy. There were skeptics who doubted her motives, critics who accused her of hypocrisy, but she persevered. For the first time in years, she felt truly fulfilled, knowing her work mattered. As months passed, the couple became increasingly involved in advocacy efforts. They attended conferences, gave interviews, and wrote articles about the importance of responsible technology development. Together, they founded a nonprofit organization dedicated to educating the public about the risks and benefits of AI, ensuring that future innovations prioritized ethics over profit. Their efforts earned them recognition and respect, but more importantly, they brought them closer together. Working side by side toward a common goal reignited the spark that had initially drawn them to each other. They laughed more, argued less, and learned to appreciate the beauty of compromise. One afternoon, as they stood on stage at a conference accepting an award for their contributions to ethical AI, Karoline glanced at Daniel and smiled. He returned, the gesture, his eyes filled with pride and gratitude. In that moment, she realized how far they had come, not just as individuals, but as partners. After the event, they drove home in silence, the weight of the day settling over them. When they arrived, Karoline stepped out of the car and looked up at the stars. "Do you ever think about what might have happened if we hadn't stopped Nexus Core?" she asked softly. Daniel joined her, gazing upward. "All the time," he admitted. "But then I remember where we are now, and I wouldn't trade it for anything." She nodded, leaning against him as the cool night air wrapped around them. "Me neither." In the end, their journey had taught them valuable lessons about courage, sacrifice, and the resilience of the human spirit. They had faced unimaginable challenges, made difficult choices, and emerged stronger than ever. Though the scars of their past would always remain, they served as reminders of what they had overcome and of the brighter future they were building together. As they walked inside, hand in hand, Karoline felt a deep sense of peace. Life was unpredictable, full of twists and turns no one could foresee. But as long as they faced it together, she knew they could handle whatever came their way. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe in happy endings.